Joe team. You no doubt know what I have chosen to speak with you about.
Get on with it, Cobra Commander.
If I do not receive $60 billion, you will never see the scientists again.
Welcome back to Retro Wednesday, the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike, and today I want to talk to you about something a little bit different. What does it cost to collect the entire run of 503 vintage G.I. Joe figures from 1982 to 1994? And I just recently went on this journey, so I can talk about this with some confidence on how expensive this can be. This journey, I'll share my journey with you. I'll give you a couple of different pricing structures. I'll give you some examples, some different stuff that's going on, and how expensive this is going to be. Although the bulk of the stuff was done in 2024, a lot of the 2025 prices are still very similar to what it was costing last year to achieve this. And yeah, all 503, I'm going to break it down into some different categories, go through my journey, explain to you kind of why I went on this journey, because a lot of times some people wouldn't want to go this crazy with it. But this is my first video since I've completed the 14-week series of doing every single G.I. Joe item. And this video is only going to be the loose. The loose, complete, couple different categories. Am I crazy for doing this? We'll get into talking about that. Let's get crazy. Let's get nuts. Coming up. Let's answer this first question on the journey. Why embark on the journey? Why go down this rabbit hole of 503 figures, which some of them are $400 figures? Some of them are really expensive. Why would you do that? Pretty simple answer is that I have been working on Retro Wednesdays since 2020, so about 4 years, 4.5 years now, of working on Retro Wednesday videos, doing an entire collection, showcasing an entire collection. Then I kind of put it on the shelf. I said it, I don't forget it. But you think about this. Look at the figures for Dukes of Hazzard, Migos Chips, constructed a lot like G.I. Joes. The same can be said for the Buck Rogers toy line. Now this toy line here is actually very similar in construction to straight art G.I. Joes, O-ring construction inside. I had a lot of fun with this collection, and I had to say, it kind of reminded me of G.I. Joe. Like, hey, why am I not completing G.I. Joe? Same thing with Robotech. Now, these are made with O-ring construction, feels very similar, and I went after this pretty hard, had a lot of fun. Some of them are kind of expensive, some of them are very, very cheap. This was a fun toy line to collect and to complete and to move on. So I do have every figure loose in this collection. Same thing with like Mego Black Hole. As I keep doing these collections of figures that are very, very similar to G.I. Joe, I keep thinking, why not complete G.I. Joe? Well, there's only like 12 figures in most of these lines, and G.I. Joe has 503. There's a sense of satisfaction that comes with completing a toy line and just putting it on the shelf and having a display and knowing that you're done. You have it all. There's really nothing else you need to buy for it. And even if they're not built the same way, they don't have the same construction of G.I. Joe, I still kind of think about it. I kind of think, would it be satisfying to complete all 500 figures? Well, it's sort of a mix of satisfaction and frustration. Thundercats, I got real frustrated collecting Thundercats. Very, 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 very frustrating line to collect. Well, I'm starting to see some of those frustrations with G.I. Joe. So in order to start this collection, I had about 130 figures, but I kind of set the rules up that I was going to just do 1 year at a time. But if I had the majority, and I would say the majority of what's in this range, 130 figures or so, I had the majority of them already. Probably about 80% of what's on these shelves. But they were in bad condition. Some of them were just really terrible condition. If I'm going to embark on this, I wanted to upgrade some of those. I mean, they're not all perfect. I still have some cracked crotches, some broken thumbs here and there, but started out with 1982. This was already an eye-opener how expensive this is going to be. I kind of wrote it off as a one-off. It's the first year, and I didn't really care about straight arm, but it was still pretty expensive. From what I had, I still had to spend like $600 to try to round out just that 1 year. Things started getting a little bit better as I was going through here, and I told myself, that I was just going to do Joe and do it 1 year at a time. And then I would start on the 90s. Well, I was doing okay with that for a little bit, but as you're looking through this Joe for vintage stuff, upgrading beach heads and all of those things, and getting all of the needed accessories for all of your figures, and I did a video showing me fixing up some of my originals that I had, and then getting figures that I've never had before, like Chuckles, and even a cheap figure like Crazy Legs has his one piece that's stock that is hard to get, and it's missing from about 90% of them. And then over here with Quick Draw, is that his name, he's missed his hose. He has a hose that's blue hose that's hard to get sometimes. So looking at all this, it starts getting really expensive and really pricey really fast. We got the payload, and we got these figures with the Defiant that only came with the Defiant for the most part. I believe maybe they were available down the road, but very expensive. I mean, that was like $300 for the pair. And I hear I got a good deal because a friend of mine that owns a shop said she sold her set for $1,000. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. But as I started going through this, and one hurdle after another, I'm a couple $1,000s in on this, few $1,000s in on collecting and trying to get caught up here. But the 90s stuff starts showing up, and the 90s stuff shows up cheap. And I'm thinking, if I don't buy it now for this cheap price, I might not find it that price again. So I started buying up 90s stuff, truly not knowing who's who or what's what. I mean, some of them are pretty obvious. They're just repaints. But a lot of them, it's just hard to tell who's who. That's Wild Bill. Who's who in the 90s? It didn't really make a lot of sense. So I had a big mess of, we're talking all of the 90s figures laid out, trying to get the accessories and weapons and stuff, but while I'm still trying to finish up the normal stuff. And then it dawned on me, Cobra still exists. Now I told myself I wasn't going to mess with Cobra until I completed all the Joes. Do all the Joes first, then work on the Cobras. But the problem is, if you're looking for G.I. Joe, Cobras pop up. And I'm going to be honest, the Cobra designs are just way more interesting than the G.I. Joe designs. A lot of the Joes are a little bit on the boring side. And especially the earlier ones, I mean, I had a memory of them, I liked them, but some of these Cobra figures really stand out on a shelf and look fantastic. So looking at a few of these, trying to get them into frame here, but like Cobra Troopers and Cobra Commander, Troopers, Storm Shadow just really pop. Then there's a very expensive one behind him that came later on, which is a repaint of him, but that's a Black Major. So for my personal collection, a lot of the expensive ones, I just bought $25 Black Majors, called it a day, moved down the road, and with that, I'm okay with it. The expensive ones that are like Melloways and those kinds of things, but my first number, well, technically my second number, it's going to include all the Melloways, but it's not going to include the subgroups that are just simple repaints. Now, a lot of this stuff ends up being repaints. Before I get into any of that, I do want to say with Cobra, I did make myself a rule, 2 rules. I completely quit buying vehicles. Vehicles over with for this line, at least for now. We'll see in the future. There's like 2 I might pick up, I've been thinking about, but I'm done with the buying of the vehicles and only 3 troop builders. So when I get to 3, I'm good. If I don't have 3 yet, I'm allowing myself to get a 3rd. And that's, I think, how you can control the urge to troop build. Because there's really no need for 10 or 20 of any of the figures. Even Cobra Troopers and even Bats. All right, so enough of the journey. Let's get into talking about the first of my numbers. The first number I would say is if you collected your own stuff, bought them originally for, this one says Gibson's for $3.79. A friend of mine says Gibson's was like Ross and Ollie's. I felt like Gibson's was closer to TG and NY and all of those. Here's one that was bought at the AFES for $2.95, which usually was the cheapest and on military base. And then TG and Y over here, it has to have faded like the, $3.99. It says $3.99 on it. So anywhere between $2 and $4. I'm gonna say 503 figures at about $4. That's about $2,000. But the problem is the drivers, and you have to factor in, you'd have to buy a flag to get certain things, but then they reissued some of the drivers later. So my calculations come out to approximately $2,600 if you were to have bought them as they were released, starting in 1982 to 1994 when we were kids. Back then, $2,600, and you kept them in good condition, didn't lose them, and all that kind of stuff. $2,600, and that doesn't count the little minifigures, of course. The next number I'm going to talk about is not going to include subgroups. The subgroups would be like, this is Arctic mission, and then there's Brazil mission, all that stuff. Practicing some new techniques that'll help stabilize the camera, but we got the Brazil mission. Now, out of Brazil mission, we do have to count him because he's a new character. He's not just a repaint of an existing character that was put as a special group. Now, a lot of people don't really look at these repaints like Tiger Force as being a necessity at all, and same kind of goes for these Marauders. So between the Marauders, Slaughter's Marauders, and the Tiger Force, a lot of people don't look at those as being necessary to have a complete set. They just skip them. And you can see that, and it really does show when it comes to G.I. Joe Classified, which I want to point out with G.I. Joe Classified and making it hard for me to get what I want, pushed me over the edge to say I care more about vintage, and I prioritize vintage over Classified now. Another subgroup category here is Python Patrol. Python Patrol is something I kind of like. I have them carded for the most part, not all of them, but most of them. They're not counted in this next number, but I do count the Ninja Force and then the Mega Marines and all those kinds of things. The reason I count all those is because they are different characters and figures, and all those are repaints of them down the road. They did different things with them, like make them change colors and stuff. Counting all of those. Then, of course, all these figures, like, is it Snowstorm here, this one right here, and then I believe Outback, which they just made gratuitous color variations in the same year, side by side. I mean, maybe one came out later, but those have to be counted because they were figures and versions and stuff. The last number will count everything, including Tiger Force and all that. So I'm counting melloways like the Fridge and other ones that are probably a little bit less fun to acquire, like, say, well, this is the Black Major version, but Starduster, and then this Silver Grand Slam. He's a repaint, but he was an official figure the next year. So this first number, let's get into talking about what this first number is. And I came across a few different numbers to establish this number. On average, the average G.I. Joe figure from the vintage line costs about $36. Some are going to be $100, some are going to be $400, some are going to be $12. It just is what it is. But it seems like $36 per figure. Now you multiply that times the 448 figures, which there are 55 figures that are in the Tiger Force and Python Patrol and all of those. And with that comes around 16,000, but my number actually that I calculated was 18,000. So there's a $2,000 variance. Now, in this number is not actually counting mint. This is counting fair to good. You might have a couple of broken crotches, but complete. So that is my number. And how do I know that? Because, well, did I spend that? No. I actually spent about 10,000, and I had about 130 figures, and I know what I had to replace, and I know what people were getting for the stuff that I already had that I didn't have to replace. And so with that, a full run without things like good old Night Force. Night Force is probably the most expensive of these subgroups that I'm not counting. That is about 18,000. Now, what happens when you add in these subgroups? These crazy wild subgroups, which I probably have about 1,000 tied up in this subgroup. And maybe a little more, maybe 1,100. I'm not complete. I'm missing some accessories, and some of my accessories are... Everything's original right now so far, but I did some shady stuff I'm not going to talk about. But what would it cost? What's this cost going to be to add in all of these subgroups? To add in the subgroups, I would say about another 3,000 in fair to good condition, but complete. A lot of people would say, no, that's how much it costs just to get the Night Force. In my experience, if you have time and patience, you can get the Night Force for probably $1,500 if you took your time. But anyhow, mine aren't complete yet, so I really can't speak on that. But I'm going to allocate $3,000 So we're up to the whole set in fair to good condition with a handful of reproduction parts. I guess I should throw that in there. That's going to be about 21,000. I haven't really shown this shelf yet, but when people think of 90s, even I think of 90s. I think affordably priced, cheap. Now, I did get pretty much all. I think I'm missing 2 of the Street Fighter characters, and I'm probably not even going to go after them. My collection, I'm missing about 5 or 6 figures total, and about 20 accessories, most of which is with Knife Force. But some of these figures can get pricey. These Mega Marines can get expensive. I was shocked to see that. Some of these, like this guy, can get expensive. And then Ozone, which I don't even have that one, but Ozone, the 4th version, that guy can get expensive too. Even just all of these in this whole vicinity here get a little bit pricey. You're looking above the $36 average, get up into like 52 and all of that. And so 1994 is not the cheapest year to collect. It's not. By far, I think it's more expensive to complete a 1994 set than to complete a 1982 straight arm set. My final number is going to focus on condition. As you can see right here, I have probably what most spirits look like. In fact, those arm sleeves look pretty good too. But they look kind of dull. This blue, brighter blue, is a more mint condition figure. Now, to say the first number of 21,000 includes fair to good condition, not mint condition, meaning upgrading from a figure that you can get for like 35, need to spend 70 to track something like that down. Much bigger difference, in my opinion. And so with that, you're talking making sure everything's mint, and every microphone and everything is original. We're talking Starduster being original. And I'm not talking about getting all the different versions of 4 Stardusters, how many there are out there, or how many of these Steel Brigades that are out there. And as you can see, I've got an original next to my Black Major. And that's as far as I'm going with Steel Brigade. I don't need any more of that. But with that, everything being original, all the mics and all that stuff, which I'm going to tell you, some of my stuff is not original. I got a lot of repro stuff in here. Probably about 20 repro items in my collection, and I'm okay with it. You might not be okay with it, but it saved me about $1,000. So to save $1,000 with repro stuff is perfectly fine with me. In my book, I still got that $1,000, and I got my shelf looking the way I want it to, so I'm okay. I'm probably not going to be the person that resells this, probably my kids, but what's the value? All right, so I'm going to reveal the final number, the final price, no matter the cost, of what it costs to collect all of the figures in mint condition with all original weapons, all original accessories, all original mics and everything. How much does that cost? And that number, you add an additional $6,000, so it's about $27,000. And that's today's money. That's in today's market. And of course, there are ways to get it cheaper. Now, I did a video on how to do things cheaper. I did everything in that video. When I was finishing collecting this, it still cost me $10,000. Now, lucky for me, I sold a whole lot of stuff from a whole lot of different toy lines to help offset that a bit. Not entirely, but pretty close. And I was really happy that I was able to do that last year. I don't know if this year it's even going to be possible to sell that much stuff, but I have to say that this was a crazy, wild journey. I'm a little bit out of my mind for doing it. I'm happy that I did it. I'm glad that I'm on the other end of it, only having a handful of things to go after, and I can just sit back and when they pop up, or somebody that I know ends up finding one for me, or I just stumble across it in the wild, which almost never happens. But with that, yeah, $27,000 to get a mint set, and everyone's journey will be different. Obviously, going to JoeCon and those kinds of things, you're going to have 100 different vendors fighting each other on price, so you can negotiate it down. But the most expensive and the most rare stuff, most people don't budge on the price. So this is a different kind of video, a different format of video than I normally do. And I really am curious what you guys think about this, how this went. And what do you think about my numbers? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Does my math math? Does my math math at all? And I'm curious, how many people out there have collected all 503 figures? Have everything from the run of 1982 to 1994. How many people are out there that have every single little microphone. Every microphone, original. Every accessory, original. Because mine's not there. I'm not that guy. And as much money as I spent, I could have spent a whole lot more. And there's also the issue of, does this stuff even exist for sale right now? And lastly, if this video is popular enough, people seem to care about it enough and enjoy it enough, then I'm going to do the same exact thing but with carded. But it will not be exactly the same. It'll be my traditional format where I basically do pictures. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, subscribe. Yo, Joe. Teddy Hanger out.